Hello and welcome to the AV Forum's Hi-Fi podcast for Monday, the 5th of February. Hi-Fi podcast. Yes, it's something new, something that we're doing this year. And of course, with it being the Hi-Fi podcast, we've got our Hi-Fi editor, Ed Selley. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, Ed.
Yeah, morning, afternoon, evening, Phil. Hope all's well.
Yeah, very good. Looking forward to doing this again and being a little bit organised in what we're doing. And of course, we also have our news reporter, Ian Collen. Ian, good evening,
Hello.
good afternoon, good morning.
How are we all doing?
Sir. Yes, very
Delirious,
good.
mate.
Lots of pressure washing going on there, Ian.
It never ends. It never ends. Power washing cycle is eternal.
So this week we have an overview of trends that we saw last year in Hi-Fi, and we're asking, will we see those continue into the new year, or are we in store for some new tech in 2024? Can we call it Hi-Fi anymore? Is there a crossover completely now? And we're going to discuss all of that. We're also going to discuss what we're doing editorially with Hi-Fi this year, so our reviews, videos, all that kind of thing. And of course, what you can expect from this new podcast schedule going into 2024, because we're no longer doing the live stream. But if you do have your questions, and we do encourage it, we want you to get involved. We do these podcasts for you, the listener, AV Forums member, and of course, wider public out there watching us on YouTube and so on. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, feedback, podcast@avforums.com on the email. Or the easier way is to head to the thread on AV Forums. You'll find that on the thread list. Right down the bottom of the forum list is the podcast forum. Go in there, find this podcast, and ask your question in there. And our producer, Andy, it's just Andy, but we put the producer bit at the start just to, because that's what he does. He'll delve in there. He'll find those comments and questions, and then we'll cover them in the next podcast. So, yeah, if you are watching the YouTube version or you want to watch a YouTube version, you also have to remember that this is not on the main channel anymore. So this is not on the AV Forums channel. You need to subscribe to the AV Forums podcast channel. Nice and easy to find in the search. Go and subscribe there and make sure you don't miss any editions of the podcast. And there's going to be plenty of them this year, with a podcast available on every Monday from 7 p.m. on YouTube, and then a little bit later on your podcast provider for the audio-only version. And throughout the month, we're going to do different categories. So this is the Hi-Fi podcast. The next one will be TV podcast next week. So that's TV, displays, calibration, all that kind of thing. Home AV, so we're talking home cinema, media rooms, speaker systems, Dolby Atmos, all that kind of thing, as well as projectors and large screens and all that we'll find in the Home AV podcast. And then we have our two movies editions. So you have your movies and streaming and the 4K disc and physical media editions of the podcasts. So we've got a very feature-packed month on most months, but those months where we have 5 Mondays, and we do realise there are the odd month where there is an extra day. So that's April, July, September, and December. We're going to bring you a gaming podcast with Ian hosting. So we're looking forward to that. Lots of power wash, simulation talk, and so on. That's all coming up on those podcasts. So you've got a full year to look forward to. And of course, because we're doing these recorded and we're planning out for the year, you can jump amongst them. You don't have to wait for the next podcast. You can go back and listen to things because it's not time sensitive or anything like that. We're talking about things that you guys want to know about. And we are the largest avian hi-fi, or one of the largest hi-fi, maybe not the largest, but one of the largest avian hi-fi communities on the internet. We've been around a long time. AV Forums was founded back in 2000. We started our editorial in 2003, so over 20 years ago. Nearly 500,000 members on AV Forums as well. And of course, our editorial covers everything from TV, hi-fi, home AV, gaming, movies, and physical media. So we cover a wide gamut of subject matter there as well. And the main thing and the important thing is that we create this content for you, the end user. We don't create it for manufacturers or advertisers or anything like that. We are here at the end of the day to try and give you some honest, unbiased, and experienced opinions and knowledge, and some really bad humor and bad dress sense. That's what we're here for. That's what we do.
Nothing else.
So maybe you don't know who we are and why we're here and so on. You might be new to the podcast. So who are we? Well, very briefly, I'm Phil Hinton. I'm the editor of the site. I've been for over 20 years. I helped build the editorial right from the start with the forum founder, Stuart, and so on. And it is what it is today. But first and foremost, I'm an enthusiast. I've loved this hobby for a very, very long time, like the other guys on the podcast here. I'm also, without blowing my own trumpet, experienced TV and AV reviewer, display calibrator. I've been trained and certified by the PVA, ISF, and THX. And I also produce a lot of the videos and star in a lot of the videos that you see on our YouTube channel. Although Ed is going to be picking up the camera this year, so look forward to Ed joining the team.
Stand by that.
And some other faces as well. So Ed, why don't you tell us, or tell the new listeners and viewers, all about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Ed Selley. Like Troy McClure, you may remember me from pretty much any publication that's prepared to pay money. I am the hi-fi editor for AV Forums, but unlike Phil, I am self-employed. I will continue to produce work for a variety of locations, but I have been a member of AV Forums for over 20 years now, which is terrifying in itself. And I have been part of the editorial team for, it'll be 12 years in April, which in itself is quite extraordinary as well. I now only do 2-channel audio, be it sometimes portable, sometimes full size, but I don't do multi-channel. I have tested multi-channel for AV Forums in the past. I am conversant with multi-channel. However, I am an enthusiast of 2-channel. I believe that's where my strengths lie. We have talented AV reviewers for that reason, and I leave them to their own devices. Every once in a great while, and I suspect much less going forward than ever was before, I will step in to do off-site AV content, but for the most part we now have people on board to do that for me and probably do a better job of it. I produce, as Phil says, a large quantity of written reviews. We will, with some trepidation, we will be moving into some video content as well. Bear with us on that one. And yes, I effectively produce, if you like, the bulk of 2-channel content, but we have other 2-channel reviewers who step in to cover products when we need excess capacity. And also there are certain products where for professional reasons, going back to what Phil says about impartiality, I am uncomfortable covering because, as I say, I am a freelancer. I do a variety of other things behind the scenes. So across the people who do the work, we can cover the things that we think are important for you to read about, but it's not exclusively done by me. So that's who I am.
Thank you very much for that, Ed. And Ian, gaming background, Ian, but obviously you're our news writer as well. So tell everybody about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ian Collen. In terms of professional experience, trained as a journalist, moved into magazines because I thought that'd be a bit more fun around the turn of the century. Started off doing PC mags. It was relevant. I spent a couple of years working on Essential Home Cinema, for anybody who's been around long enough to remember that magazine from back in the day, as the saying goes. But then, yeah, after that, I moved into gaming. So gaming was a big thing, probably been about 20 years, both as an enthusiast and working on a number of games magazines, XBM, 360 Gamer that became One Gamer, that became Gamer, that became Game Interactive. There was a lot. And yeah, so that's kind of that's where I am now. So the gaming's still a big thing for me, you know, both personally and professionally, which is why I used to do a lot of game reviews for the site, for the AV Forums website. But now, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, I am doing a lot of the news content as well, and that doesn't allow me to spend 50 hours a week playing video games. Well, I might still squeeze in a good 30 hours a week playing video games, but not in the 9 to 5. Yeah, it needs to be in my own time. So yeah, as of now, I'm producing obviously a lot of the news content for AV Forums, as well as doing what I can in terms of gaming. But unfortunately, I have to freelance out some of the good stuff because I just don't have the time to put in the hours these days.
Ian is also the undisputed master of the amusing stand first. So the second line that you see in the review or the news story, they're all his, and they're all always better than mine, and I'm always slightly annoyed about that. So
I don't know where he gets.
You wouldn't believe the restraint. I had to do a piece on the climax solo. The restraint that was needed. Not to
we don't need to go there.
Yeah, that was,
we can all create our own.
I played it very safe with that one.
No, you did. Very commendable. Heroic restraint.
Yeah, excellent. So that's who we are, and like I say, lots of experience amongst the team. We're all enthusiastic at the end of the day. We're all enthusiastic about the subject, and our goal here is to entertain you and also give you the facts and inform you, and hopefully you'll enjoy the podcast. If you have any questions at all, if you want to get involved in any way, and we do encourage it, we encourage you guys to get involved, then obviously we are a large community of like-minded people. Get your questions in, like I say, on the podcast forum thread, ask away, or you can do it on email, podcast@avforums.com. Or of course, if you're watching on YouTube on the AV Forums podcast channel, remember to subscribe, but you can also comment below and leave your questions. We look at all the platforms and we'll collate them and then answer those in future podcasts. Right, Ian, current competitions that are running within the hi-fi section.
Yeah, I should quickly check first. Is it pronounced Tiak or Teak?
Teak.
Teak. Okay. So first up, as you might have guessed, you can win a Teak AI 303 integrated amplifier, which is worth £799. Well worth entering. And you can also win the ultimate streaming system worth £2,400 from Roxanne and Monitor Audio.
Yeah, that's a banger. That's well worth entering.
Yeah.
Both of them excellent competitions. Yeah. Get entering.
And if you want proof that there are winners for this, we've got a bunch of them already listed as well. Previous winners include LT, who won an Anthem MRX 540 receiver worth over £1,500.
Cracking price.
Corbin won the Bowers & Wilkins 705
Jealous
S3
of that.
Yeah.
and
Jealous
the
of that.
Audio Quest Rocket 22 worth over £3,000. That's one very lucky
Yep.
winner indeed.
Well done, Corbin.
Elsewhere, James Samaj won a pair of Aston & Kern UW100 Mark II true wireless earphones from AV.com. So thanks to AV.com for the prize. CJ Brooker has also won a Humax A1 4K Ultra HD streaming box and 3 Humax Wi-Fi smart plugs bundle. So yeah, congratulations to all of those winners.
Excellent prizes. Well done, everybody. And we've got some new patrons, Ian.
Yeah, they don't seem to be in any order of preference or speciality. We have Jordan Holland, David Dean, Just David, John Gottwalt, Ben Ackerman, Saab Unleashed. I'm hoping that's a car as well as a person. Nick, Arjun Verdi, and Sean McGreevy. So welcome aboard to all of those.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome.
Yep. Thanks for your support. Really is appreciated. And of course, you also have the opportunity to buy us a coffee. So who's done that?
Yeah, we have 4 coffees coming our way. So thanks to Jimenez, someone, that's the name they've listed. That's not just me winging it, is someone called someone. Deads with a Z, and Neil 007. So thank you, Mr. Bond. We were expecting.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much for your support, guys. Keep it coming in, and I guess it's time for us to get on with the show. So, where are we in terms of hi-fi? That's the question we're asking on the first podcast of the year, the first hi-fi podcast of the year. So, I guess what we need to do, Ed, is look at where we're coming from. The 2020s have been very interesting for a number of reasons. We had the issues at the beginning of this decade, which kind of forced a lot of hands and perhaps moved product cycles and the way people use the equipment and sources and so on a little bit differently, because we kind of had lockdown forced on us.
Yes, I think it's going to take another decade before we can start writing about the unintended effects of sticking everyone in their houses for periods of time sociologically and then just in this tiny category. But yeah, you said earlier, categorizing what is hi-fi in 2024 is pretty difficult. But in 2023, hi-fi really kicked on in doing something which I'm sure that the AV podcast is delighted about, which is taking big chunks out of AV. Effectively, when I started doing this, the idea of your hi-fi system talking to your television was, well, I mean, people did it, but it didn't happen very often, and it was sort of, seen as a bit niche. These days, absolutely the complete opposite of that. And obviously, products have had optical inputs on for donkey's years, and most televisions still have optical outputs, and that works just fine in a performative sense. But the real kick-on's been HDMI ARC. I need to stress it doesn't make any significant difference in performance terms for a 2-channel product. It's basically the same signal. But in terms of syncing up and working and being something that happens rather than something you physically have to select, so other less committed members of your household will actually use it rather than sort of looking at you in a funny way. This is all where HDMI ARC scores. And if you wanted to get a sense of just how widespread we're talking about HDMI ARC inclusion being, there's a review up on the site at the time we're reviewing. That's the WIM amp. That's £300. There's another product with HDMI ARC in the tank ready to go, which is the Tangent amps to TV 2, and that's £200 with HDMI ARC. Then at the other end of it, for other purposes, I've got a streamer in at the moment, which is £13,000. It also has HDMI ARC on the back of it. At every meaningful price point, TV integration and assuming the roles of AV is absolutely baked into a number of manufacturer strategies now. And it's buying customers at the expense of multi-channel. I make no bones about that.
It's quite a funny cycle, isn't it, Ed, when you look at
Yeah.
it? Because a lot of us who got into this hobby now, I don't want to talk for everybody because that's not my role, but certainly a lot of us, and talking about myself as well, is that when Nikon Stereo came along in terms of VCRs, the first thing we did was hook up our VCRs to our hi-fi systems that we had. We only ever had 2-channel hi. That's how I got hooked. That's how I got into home cinema and so on, because the natural progression from there was a Pro Logic amplifier, and then a Laserdisc player, and then a bigger TV, and then multi-channel sound, and then it's progressed all the way up. But what we're now seeing is people starting to revert back to the 2-channel system, and it's something we're going to come on to when we talk about where we see things going this year. But HDMI ARC or EARC has definitely helped. And for those who are maybe not familiar with ARC and eARC, basically it's a two-way communication system between two products that are suitably fitted with ARC connectors. That's usually a TV and an amplifier or a soundbar or powered speakers, that kind of thing. It's usually a plug and play. It's not always plug and play because we're talking about HDMI and we're talking about technology, but just in the most simple of terms, you plug one into one product, one end into another product, they communicate. You can usually use the same remote control and volume controls, and there's a few other bits and pieces that it'll do. But it's basically a control system between two products. And when you're talking about a trend at the minute where people are downsizing and coming back and rediscovering 2-channel, and there is so much crossover, it's one of the big drivers, as you said, really is.
No, absolutely. And as I say, it just removes a level of conscious integration for the household in terms of how it's done. So sonically, we're not talking about any significant difference, but in terms of it being used day to day, it's enormous. And as I say, it's happening now at every price point. For the most part, when this started, there were some honourable exceptions to this, but for the most part, it was something that was fitted to affordable product to differentiate it from other affordable product. It's got sufficient clout and perceived necessity now that it's cropping up at price points where we wouldn't have seen it even a couple of years ago. So it's a big deal, and I, based on the stuff that's actually being reviewed in January for February, it's not showing any signs of slowing down.
So what were the other big trends last year that you think are worth mentioning here?
Yes, hold on, bring me thing back. Now, this is more of a concern. This is less positive, although it's less positive, I suppose, for a positive reason. It can't have escaped anyone's notice that modern affordable hi-fi is astonishingly good. The WEM amplifier, that's on the front page at the moment, £300. It does streaming as well. It's got HDMI ARC. It's got an extra input. It's made out of metal. It sounds more than reasonable, and it's £300. And with digital items especially, you've got extraordinarily proficient bits of kit that cost not a lot of money. To make things that are meaningfully better, and there are multiple different descriptors of better, and we're going to cover that over the year, it ends up being a lot more expensive. So as a sneak preview, a number of times in this coming year, you're going to have a month's worth of review products where some of them cost comfortably less than £1,000 and others cost getting on for 10. Because the middle bit, £1,500 to £6,000 in particular, is under tremendous squeeze. Because to justify its existence, it has to be better than the affordable stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have enough money to do that. And that might sound ridiculous, but that is where we are. Mm-hmm. So we've got, it sounds like a speaker problem, we've got mid-range suck out. And we are going to devote a whole podcast to this because we've had some fantastic, and I do mean that in all senses of the word, comments on certain reviews, because I think the perception of what things should cost is somewhere adrift of what things actually cost. And we will deal with this, and we will be able to do it in a pre-recorded and probably mature fashion.
Yeah, I can't wait for Ian's byline on that one.
Yeah. So Absolutely. That's a that's a trend that we've started seeing in the last 2 years, and I don't think anything's going to change about that this year. And one of the reasons for that segues me effortlessly on to my next thing that started happening last year, and this is perfectly replicated in the television market, Phil. Challenger brands.
Yeah.
We've got companies turning up who have a back history that you could write on the back of a stamp, and they know this, and because of that, they are trying an awful lot harder. So you've got Hisense and TCL, and I'm not suggesting that Hisense has no history. They've been doing this for some time, but they're still not one of the big boys.
TCL
and TCL,
number 2 in the world. People don't realize this, that TCL is just an offshoot of a major company that is number 2 in the world when it comes to making TVs.
Yeah. So you've got them. This last year we saw Eversolo and Wim make their AV Forums debut, even if it wasn't necessarily the point where they were launched. Both are digital products that just do more at price points that more conventional, more long-standing brands haven't got an answer to at the moment. It's disruptive, deliberately disruptive. Wim's strategy in the market is deliberately and publicly disruptive. And it sort of essentially places a considerable amount of strain on existing contenders, but it's good for the consumer. It then also means in turn that if you're a mature brand and you're particularly good at one thing, you double down on that. You stop experimenting in categories where you might be eaten alive by a new contender. You go back to where your perceived strengths are. Now that in turn leads on to the next point, which is vinyl, which is still there. It's still distorting the market. It's still doing strange things to how products are designed. And again, we'll talk about this. But it's a mature category. I do feel confident saying that for the first time. I'm looking at growth figures, so on and so forth, for various reasons, some of which are wholly self-inflicted. I don't believe there's that much more growth to do in terms of sale of media or the equipment, which means it's a mature category, which means that you want to try and progress people who might have an affordable turntable up the food chain and so on and so forth, and only expect a smaller number of people to come in at the bottom. It's a mature category. We saw fewer new brands get involved in it last year. I think that's going to be even more pronounced this year, and it's going to belong to legacy brands, most of whom were doing it before it was cool. And it's so different from the other engineering required in audio. That's not a huge surprise, but it's no longer a gold rush. It's like we had it with headphones. Actually, when I got into reviewing for AV Forums, the World and his wife was releasing headphones, and most of those companies that piled in enthusiastically have since piled back out enthusiastically. I'd say Focal and Bowers and Wilkins are the main arrivals from that time period. Almost everyone else has quit. And I suspect that it's now time to see much the same thing with turntables. And that's not just at the entry level. There are some very expensive debut turntables doing the rounds that will see out their natural life and then probably won't be replaced. So we saw that starting to happen, and it's going to keep happening.
With vinyl, I really didn't expect it to still be around the way it is come 2023, 2024. I thought it was a retro craze that was going to, burn brightly and then disappear very quickly again. That hasn't been the case. It's stuck around this time. And it surprises me. I walk into HMV whenever I'm in the Metro Centre or I'm near somewhere I can physically walk in and view this stuff. And I look at the prices and I think, who is buying this? But obviously people are buying it. Yeah. Obviously there's obviously a market there.
There is. And I went to a record fair, because that's the sort of action-packed weekend that I go in for. I was staggered at how many people there were younger than me. I mean, I know I'm not young anymore, but nevertheless, it's still an extra. I mean, when you compare it to hi-fi shows, it's quite the difference. But nevertheless, the number of people willing to buy £40 records to play on a £70 player that ruins them. Yeah, we've reached a finite ending.
That's the bit that I don't understand. I really don't understand.
I mean, from a novice's point of view, I mean, you talk about the legacy brands and who's good and who's not. I mean, who are the names of those, young cool kids should be trusting that maybe they wouldn't have heard of because they've been around for 30 years before they were born? I mean, I don't know. I've written news stories about a few, and I'm guessing that. But
well, it's fair. There's a fair question. I think one brand without necessarily trying, has carved back out a reputation for wider market awareness, which is Technics, because of the level of penetration they had before. I don't think they've done anything spectacular in marketing terms with the new turntables, but they have kept the awareness. They look like the ones that came before. They're still built in a way that you could beat someone to death with them without causing them any material
I think
harm.
what helps Technics is to become a bit of a cultural icon. The whole dance craze, the whole deep house and all that kind of thing, and the UK was a big driver for that. And one of the big things that was behind that was Technics turntables. They were used in a professional capacity. People had them on their T-shirts. It became a bit of a fashion item to have Technics baseball caps and that kind of thing, and smiley faces on T-shirts and all.
Yeah.
That they
Branding
really
helps.
benefited from that.
Yes.
They really did, and it surprised me
Absolutely.
that they then pulled out the market at that point.
Oh well, no. Whoever did that, I mean, that's not signing the Beatles because he had enough guitar acts, isn't it?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they have recovered from that. And then in terms of how to do it, everyone should look at Riga, because Riga's still not an enormous company, but their penetration and people's awareness of them as an affordable turntable manufacturer is phenomenal. And this is from a company that doesn't really advertise. It does, because it's very, very active in its own social media spaces, and it constantly makes you aware of its existence. And it does things like sponsor Record Store Day, and they've put competition prizes up for us in the past and so on and so forth. But they don't stick adverts in newspapers and magazines and stuff. They just make you constantly aware that they've been making record players for 50 years. They still sell record players at what in 2024 constitutes an entry-level price. And people are all over it. It's brilliantly done. I'd argue they're better at it than their arch rival Project. Project has more engineering clout, if you like, but nevertheless, Riga's brilliant at it. And so then that takes us to Project. And then further up the pecking order, there have been manufacturers who have been calmly and carefully making turntables for anything between 20 and 70 years. And they are going to continue doing it. Thank you very much. And if and when you make it up to the price points where they operate, they'll be only too happy to take you through it. But they're not going to necessarily make enormous efforts to try and get get entry-level customers through the door. So vinyl we'll still be looking at turntables for every forums. I'd quit if you stopped me. But I have to be more sanguine about the ones that we are looking at and why we're looking at it. We've got 2 turntables being reviewed this month, which sounds a bit counterintuitive in light of what I've just said. But when you see one of the turntables that's being reviewed, you'll understand why it doesn't necessarily count as normal. So that's what's going on there. So those are the big trends that we saw. I'm going to do predictions in just a moment, but 2023 anchored and cemented a number of things that have been happening. It's that certain things have just started to accelerate. So across every price point, your audio system is more likely to talk to your television. It's more likely to be either very affordable or fairly unaffordable. And if it has a turntable, it's going to be from a manufacturer that was probably doing it before vinyl got cool again. So that's what we saw.
I think the thing we've seen again since this decade started is the old stereotype of hi-fi and hi-fi enthusiast has well and truly disappeared. The old smoking jacket, pair of slippers, the pipe, sit down and get the turntable up and running. That's a figment of the past now, if it ever was a true statement of a hi-fi enthusiast. It used to be an old man's game.
I mean, it's still not. I need to stress it. We could still do with relaxing the demographic slightly, but yes, there is. I'm delighted in some of the professional capacities that I work, that I interact with people who are encouragingly young. I think that they'll outlive me. Let's put it like that. So that's we are making progress, and I think there's a number of different dynamics to thank for that. But yeah, it is looking up. If you like, 2 Channel had its flirting with extinction moment about, I suppose, 15, maybe 20 years ago. Affordable 2 Channel had no easy justification for its existence against affordable AV. And it's gone and created one. It's come back from that brink. In some ways, it's time for AV to start making a credible case for justifying its existence. Exactly. So it's interesting how these things reverse and how everything is cyclical. But no, I'm more positive about two-channel continuing to exist than I have been in a very long time. What I'm less confident about is predicting exactly in what shape or form it continues to exist.
Right, well, let's get on to these predictions then, because this is something, because this was recorded and these podcasts stay around as long as we keep putting 50 pence in the server meter, you'll always be able to come back to this. So, Ed, give us your predictions for the year and we'll come back in December and laugh at you and point fingers.
I mean, I stand to be proved completely and utterly wrong on this, but we'll see how we go. The first one I don't think is in any way contentious at all. My prediction is we're already seeing an uptick in powered and active speakers, and we have been for the last 2 years.
I do laugh at this because I started a long time ago with this.
Yeah.
This
no, you were well ahead of the power curve on this one.
Saying,
and people thought you were demented.
Yeah, they did. I changed the AV Forum's review system to active speakers, and people were like, "What are you playing at? What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" But it makes sense when from an engineering point of view, but also a performance point of view. If you're designing the amplification to work with the woofers, to work within the cabinet design that you've put forward, and they all work in harmony, that's much better than trying to find an amplifier to then match to your speakers. The speakers then have. It's just a simplified way of doing it where you get some huge benefits. And I have a pair of Genelecs connected to this laptop, and I've had them for 20 years. And they still sound as good as the day that I first switched them on.
Yeah.
And the little active powered near field monitors, they're amazing, absolutely amazing speakers, so detailed and so on. And it's funny, it's amusing to me to see this sort of come back around and actually be a really nice big area of the market, because it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think what's important to stress as part of this prediction, I'll be more specific. We're going to see no shortage of smart wireless speakers. There's a pair on test here at the moment. There'll be more. There'll always be more. But we're going to see more conventional, if you like, traditional active speakers, which present an XLR or an RCA connection to the world. And they have amplifiers and a powered crossover on board, but no inputs other than that, no processing, so on and so forth. This is because it's 2024 and so many different things are preamps that they don't need to go to that effort. I mean, we're talking about disruptive technology. The Eversolo DMP-A8, we tested it late last year. It didn't actually do the same numbers as the A6, but I think we were just slightly slower to the punch on it. But nevertheless, it's a streamer with a fully analog preamp on board. You can run a turntable through it and it sounds exactly like a turntable. There's no processing, there's no A to D conversion, and it's a sensationally good preamp. So if you're a manufacturer and you're thinking, I don't know how to do HDMI ARC and I don't know how to do so, you don't need to. You just need to make sure that you get your amplification correct. It's, as Phil says, mate it to the drivers, make sure the crossover is as it should be, and someone else will do the heavy lifting in terms of how you get inputs to it and adjust the gain is the basic point on this. And I think a number of companies have cottoned onto this, and we're going to see quite a few of them. So that's my first and least contentious prediction.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. I mean, this is a quick question about whether that's kind of seen as more, whether there's like a divide between the traditionalist, people who like the separates, and whether the active solutions kind of is more of an increasing trend because maybe the younger audience is more up to like the smart home adaptability and they like everything to be simple, one box solution to keep it easy. Is there likely to be kind of two sides to the coin, so to speak?
Well, yes and no. I certainly think that newer arrivals to hi-fi are far more relaxed about the shape and roles and responsibilities that each box should undertake. They're much, much calmer about it, and that makes it makes active speakers an easier sell. The other thing is, if you are an absolute tweaker, and I don't mean this in a heroin abuse sense, I mean that you can't leave anything alone. You're selecting the amplifier that you like the best to go with the speakers you like the best. And active speakers remove this element of choice. But as Phil says, it removes this element of choice by presenting you with an optimized pair. So for some people, it's always been the way forward. ATC, for example, has been selling active speakers very, very happily for a very long time and has a fanatical following. So, it's going to be interesting to see, a number of people have been adherents to this for was longer than I've been alive. But I think as you say, Ian, it's easier to convince people who are coming at this from a different perspective to classic starter hi-fi to get on board with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are practicality issues that people don't necessarily come to terms with until they unpack them in their rooms. You need a main socket going to each speaker location that you have, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do in certain circumstances. And if you've got the powered active wireless speakers, if you want to get HDMI ARC to it and you want to dress that cable, yeah, you think about that before it gets in there, because it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. You are sold this picture of these boxes sat in glorious isolation with nothing around them, and back in the grimy, tedious reality in which we inhabit, it's not as simple as that. But nevertheless, the appeal of it, the elegance of it, and the engineering arguments for it mean that we are going to see a lot more of it. I don't doubt that.
And we're going to see a lot more crossover as well. A lot more crossover. And one product that stood out for me at CES this year was the Canvas hi-fi speaker.
Yes.
You know, this is the crossover between the soundbar and a hi-fi system in your living room. The way that, and this is another startup. There's actually no history to this company. The CEO has a long line of history building loudspeakers and so on, but it's a brand new startup company. But the solution is very, very interesting, and it takes the best of both, mixes it together, adds some interesting processing from Bach 3D in there, in terms of cancellation effects and so on into each ear. And the performance, I'm waiting on the review sample turning up. Hopefully it will turn up, but certainly just from a demonstration in a hotel suite, I was blown away. I thought, wow, this is really, really good. Yeah. It's expensive. It's not for everybody. And I guess this is something else we'll cover as the weeks and months go on, Ed, is that, you know, there is no such thing as a perfect product, a perfect TV, a perfect hi-fi. It's what is perfect for you at the end of the day. But you know, at $3,500, it's a lot of money, but it's also a design statement in your living room. It's really well built. It has all the processing, and it's that crossover product that has maybe been threatening to be coming for a while now, where you take the soundbar and instead of it being crushed, you open it up a bit, widen it out a bit, put some really nice drivers in there, put some nice technology in there, HDMI ARC connector. It'll run your streaming services like Tidal and Qobuz and so on at full res. What else do you need, really? It's a really good product and a nice little crossover segment.
And it leads actually perfectly onto the next prediction, which I don't believe is contentious either, that we're going to see another challenger brand. I don't know the segment. I don't know the brand. If I knew the brand, I'd be busy trying to buy into it, because I could do with an extra line of income, if I'm honest. But we're going to see someone else shake up a category in a way that I would argue that Eversodo and Wim did brilliantly last year with their respective products. And it'll come out of the clear blue sky and surprise us all. But there will be one of them, undoubtedly.
What's right for disruption? What would be a good market to be disrupted?
That's a bloody good question. I'm inclined to say that it's possible. The two categories that stand out as being ripe for it, I think true wireless earphone manufacturers have grown pretty complacent in what they're doing. There's scope to do more with true wireless earphones, or there's scope to get premium features down to a seriously bargain basement price, and that's sort of been done a couple of times, but with varying degrees of compromise. Someone might actually move the compromise.
There may be a question as to what you mean by truly wireless headphones.
No, that's fair. That I mean the complete antithesis of what I'm wearing on this podcast. I mean ones that sit in a recharging case, and once they are in your ears, they have no link either to the device transmitting or to each other, because there's tethered wireless as well, where you have a yoke behind your head, very useful for exercise and so on and so forth. And then obviously wired earphones like I'm using at the moment, which are physically wired to my microphone. So it doesn't matter what happens in this podcast. My audio is probably likely to keep working. I'm a big fan of wires for that reason. So true wireless earphones, I mean, AirPods set the stage, and various manufacturers have produced excellent products. I just think it's locked in a cycle of comfort. And by comfort, I mean comfort for the manufacturers. No one's disrupted it in quite a while. And then I also suspect that for different reasons, it's probably time that people had a better look again at all-in-ones. The Just Add speaker all-in-one again has settled into a comforting rut of things that do certain things cost X amount and things that do without those features cost Y amount, and so on and so forth. Someone's going to blitz into that and deliver lots and lots of functionality at a much, much lower price. I mean, if you like, the Wimamp it might be a portent of that, because that's an all-in-one system in all but name, and it's £300. But there's more to come from that, I suspect. So both of those categories, off the top of my head, would be where it is. So you can rest assured that it almost certainly won't be either of those. And then my last prediction. This is the most contentious. We're going to do not so much in podcast stuff. We're going to do a bit more actual coverage work and editorial work on music streaming services this year. Quite a lot's changed since we last looked at them. I think we're going to lose one in the next calendar year for various reasons, legal ones, and in some way, some tiny way, I don't want to in any way prejudice the result on this. I think we're going to lose a music streaming service. We are overpopulated, and we have 2 streaming services owned and operated by companies that can't go bust. So that creates a significant stress on those that don't have that luxury. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to lose one. I'd be happy to be proved wrong on this. Choice is good, and there are compelling reasons for almost all of the streaming services available in the UK at the moment. But I'm just looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the squeeze on people's finances and so on and so forth. I think that, yeah, we might be down one that we have at the moment. So those are my predictions. They are being recorded on the 1st of February 2024, and we'll revisit them with some hilarity in December and see where I was.
I don't think you'll be too far away, Ed. I think there's some pretty solid predictions in there that I think, just looking at where we've been, where we're going, I think you're bang on the money. I think the only one that may or may not happen is a streaming service. But I agree with you. I think if something was going to happen there, and I agree with you with the Challenger brand, just looking at how busy things were at CES and how many startups were with some really interesting takes. And this is what it is. It's and I'm glad you touched on it a bit earlier when we were talking about who you work with in the industry as well, and how you're seeing new generations coming in with new ideas and with new use cases, and probably use cases that we don't even consider. And this is where you could see a whole new category coming or starting or whatever. I agree with you on that one. I think it's ripe for that to happen at the minute.
Absolutely. So that's me.
Okay.
Now this is more of an interactive between you and I. This section, isn't it? Because I'm going to talk about what my goals are as the hi-fi editor for 2024.
Yeah.
And it feeds into a wider pattern of ambition for AV Forums for 2024.
So before we go into editorial, obviously Ed's given his predictions of where he thinks things are going to go hi-fi wise. But of course, we're a massive community. We've got lots of you out there. You've all got your opinions. You all look at the market in slightly different ways. You all use your equipment slightly differently to how other people may or may not. And you might have your ideas and where you think things are going to go in the next 12 months. So tell us about it. Give us your comments. If you're watching on YouTube on the AV Forums podcast channel, remember to subscribe and then ask your questions down below, or give us your points of view or where you think things are going. And of course, you can head over to avforums.com. Lots of forums over there, lots of hi-fi forums for you to get involved with as well. But if you head to the podcast forum and this podcast, find the thread, put your question or your point of view in there, and we'll certainly come back to them on the next podcast. Like I say, we are looking, we are reading. We want you guys to get more involved with this. We're making it for you guys at the end of the day. So yeah, get your comments and so on in. Right, let's talk editorial then for the year ahead, Ed. So if people don't understand how AV Forums works in terms of our reviews and so on, Ed has 7 slots every month. So I ask Ed to produce 7 reviews for AV Forums every calendar month. Now, that does raise a few issues. Maybe you want to talk about the issues and how you deal with that, because at the end of the day, I don't tell you what to review. I say, Ed, give me 7 reviews that you think our audience want to know about.
No, every now and again, Phil will email me and say, I've been contacted by X. Do you think it's worthwhile? For the most part, actually, he's got a good radar on this, so they are worthwhile. But no, I'm frequently left to my own devices. Now, 7 slots, they're not equal lengths. 5 are what we term full-length reviews, which will be in excess of 2,000 words. And then there are 2 short forms. So they are around 1,000 words, and we generally use them for smaller products where you simply don't need to spend 2,000 words on them. And it just allows us to cover a meaningful extra quantity of products a year. One of the changes that we have made in recent years, as I say, it's not just me doing the reviews these days. So sometimes the AV lot moonlight in the same way that every once in a great while I do AV things. There are products which meaningfully count as having an interest to both parties. So Martin, in particular, is perfectly proficient at reviewing stereo products.
And it should be pointed out as well that we're enthusiasts. So we don't just, I review TVs, but that doesn't mean that I just look at TVs and Martin looks at AV. But we're enthusiasts of the whole thing. I mean, hi-fi has been a part of my life for 40 odd years as well. So as well as AV. So yeah, we all have our own competencies and so on. It just so happens that we tend to focus on certain areas. So we're not all overlapping and doing the same things basically. But yeah.
And then people like Simon Lucas, tremendously talented individual, will cover for a number of items and do so very proficiently. So the long and the short of it is that with good luck and a following wind, we normally make it to a whisker over 100 products a year, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. We will make the conscious decision not to look at least one thing that will annoy every single person listening to this podcast. And that's an unavoidable nature of trying to do best fit. So I'm going to let you know in advance that's how it works. That's how it's worked from the beginning, and it's how it's going to continue to work. Not least because even significantly increasing the number of slots that are available to me, there's limits to capacity and what fits in my house. So there's not an open-ended scope to increase capacity that much further than where we are now. So that's what we will be doing. Now, the spread of those over the course of the year, with back of an envelope calculations, I try to cover a meaningfully equal quantity of major categories. Now, in this day and age, where source ends and amplifier begins and so on and so forth, is much more complicated than it used to be. But the long and the short of it is we cover the constituent parts of systems at multiple price points. Now, this multiple price point bit is important because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the middle price points being a bit more sort of thinned out because their reason to exist is in a bit of existential crisis. You're going to see, I said this earlier, didn't I? You're going to see reviews where months where many products cost not a lot of money, and then there'll be something that costs an awful lot of money. And with the best will in the world, some of it's going to feel unaffordable, and we're not doing this to rub it in your face. I mean, I'm not here to commit class warfare through audio review. It's just the nature of covering interesting things, covering technological developments, and covering important product.
And the thing is, Ed, and of course, the internet democratizes everything for everybody. Everybody has a voice online and so on. And I would never take that away from people. And AV forums is a great place for coming in and chatting, like-minded people and so on. But you do have areas of the market where the product's not for you.
No.
There's no way on earth that I could ever afford a Ferrari TDF, F12 TVF. Will I watch a review on one? If it's an entertaining reviewer, I'll sit and I'll watch that and I'll drool over it and I'll look at the not too sexy and I love the sound of the engine and so on. But I realize that that's out of my price league. That is something that I will aspire to one day if I ever have a lottery win. I may go and get myself an F12 TVF Ferrari. And I guess it's the same with audio and video. There are systems out there that I absolutely drool over, and we're very, very lucky because we get to play with these sometimes. But I'm no fool at the end of the day. I know that, and I ask this every time I review something: if I could afford this, would I have it? Is it, is it a case of, where is the value and so on? We all do it. We all say it ourselves. If it was my money, and that's why you do get conversations that tend to be on the negative side, because it's like, well, a recent one that I'll pick up on, Ed, is the Bowers and Wilkins 805 signatures.
Yeah.
£10,000 a pair. Now the D4, the non-sig version, is £6,500. So there is an uptick in price because it's the signature, but then you're getting an absolutely beautiful finish. You're getting new components in there as well. There are some genuine engineering tweaks that are done to that speaker.
Yes.
But the thing that everybody seemed to fall out about was the price of the stands. Now, things haven't moved on that much in 40 years. You always, when you budget for something, is that if you're going to buy a component, always leave 10 to 15% of your budget for any of the accessories that are required for that component that you're buying. It's the simple math of buying AV or hi-fi equipment. Don't forget, like you're buying a TV, don't forget that if it's a high-end TV, you better getting it calibrated and set up properly. So leave your 10 or 15% aside for things like that, or a TV rack or whatever. And if it's a speaker, you're going to have to sit it on something if it's a stand mount speaker, namely a stand. If it's a £10,000 pair of speakers and the stand is 1,200 quid, there's nothing unusual in that, because if you've got 10 grand to go and spend on speakers, you've got the 12 grand to spend on the stands to set the speakers on. Now, I do realise that people out there will be, well, that is a ridiculous amount of money to be spending on a speaker, especially at this time of where, you know, there is cost of living crisis and all the rest of it. Yeah, absolutely. And we're not being crass in any way, but there is a market for this. There is people who are interested. I might not have the money for those speakers, but I am interested to find out what Ed thinks. Are they actually worth that? What are the advantages of having something at that level of the market compared to the bottom end of the market? And do I feel better about my price range and products that I have? Because what you're talking about there is very little in terms of performance for a huge chunk of change. If you can afford it, great. But is it really, you know, your diminishing returns? Are you going to deal in diminishing returns? That then becomes your choice at the end of the day. But it is funny, not funny, but interesting to see the different demographics, even amongst like-minded people. And I see it in every hobby that I've had, or anything that I've been enthusiastic with. Car clubs are the same, you know, car brands and all that kind of thing, the rivalry that goes on. Even within the same kind of brands, you get oh, that's just financed from the guys that actually go and buy their stuff. And it's the same you get everywhere. But it is interesting to see that conversation. And you're right, Ed, you know, we have to be thoughtful in terms of what it is that we're covering. We have to cover stuff that people are interested in. And I'll bring it straight back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast. It's for you guys out there. That's the whole reason we do this, is so we tell you about the interesting things. We're lucky enough to play with these things, to have them in our homes, to review them, and hopefully you then get a feel for that product because of what we do with that. And then that gives you a bit of knowledge, a bit of experience with it. You can then go and add that to a short list and do your homework, and then decide if that product's for you or not, and if it's worth what it's worth to you. But yeah, and I guess it's part of the community as well, Ed, that when we come across subjects like this, it opens our eyes, because sometimes I think we get guilty as well of maybe looking at the value for money side, and actually maybe we don't look at it, and maybe we look at it reviewer's eyes.
It never ceases to amaze me that there are very, very different priorities placed in people's minds as to what constitutes value. I mean, I ascribe value to aesthetics and finish. I don't want the thing I use every day to feel shoddy and, you know, unattractive. That applies to almost everything I use. And it's not just a hi-fi thing. I am particular, let's leave it at that, about a number of items that I use and buy in my life. And for some people, it just doesn't matter. If it does the job, it could look utterly indifferent and be, you know, almost disposable in the manner in which it's constructed. And so, you know, we have to aim off for that. But if you ascribe certain values to things, it doesn't mean that those are universally applicable. And I apply that to my own understanding of things. But equally, when you go finger to keyboard, it doesn't necessarily, you know, make your opinions known. It's not necessarily going to shape editorial policy, because then it's not necessarily a view held by a significant number of other people. So, you know, that's just something that all needs to be borne in mind. So we've finished complaining, and we'll do something more positive. Now, Phil mentioned this earlier on. Video is going to play a larger role in hi-fi reviews as well. Now, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on this. So my early conversations with Phil are that we'll be selecting one of my monthly review products to have some meaningful video content created and ascribed to it. A lot of this, I make no secret about this. Phil can interrupt. We can edit it out. I think a number of it's going to be, we're going to see how certain experiments go as to whether it's shot here or whether I just do the righty-listeny bit and then it travels up to be looked at by an expert. But essentially, I've been supplied a camera. I'm assured that even someone as remedial as myself can get decent results out of it. So I thought, I mean, my perception is that there's as much worth in showing you the equipment in the context in which it's being used. So wherever possible, I'm going to try and do the video sections for the products here. There will be other times where it's meaningful and useful for them to go up to Phil and have even more done in a, you know, Phil has vastly more experience than me than this. So we're going to see what happens when we do the first couple of these, and we'll work it out from there. Yeah. But yes,
I've got a lot of confidence in you, Ed, because you know, it's I think, and you know, users and viewers and listeners, give us your thoughts on this, but I think seeing it in the surroundings that it's being tested in, taking us through how the product works in certain ways and how you interact with the product, what's the knob feel like, that type of thing. You know, all this can be picked up on a camera, and it's something that it's very difficult to get demonstrations now of some of this product unless you go to specialist dealers at different ends of the country. So it gives you another perspective on top of the written word, and Ed's written word is always excellent, but it gives you that other aspect to it where you can actually see it, not feel it, but you can see it, and you can see Ed interacting with it and so on. So I think
in a contextual sense, it's hugely important.
I think so.
That's the plan.
Going to put pressure on the recording equipment, though. If people are going to be judging the audio based on a video of you recording.
Oh no, people do apparently judge the quality of systems based on YouTube videos. I need to be clear on this. I will, if it needs me to do everything with not a second of background music, if nothing else, it should make our copyright issues significantly easier. Then I'm perfectly willing to do that, because no, I don't want you judging how something sounds on the strength of an Osmo mic.
No,
that's not why we're doing this. Yeah. So yes, and then finally for editorial goals, I have an idea in my head which I'll be presenting to Phil about the next 11 podcasts. But before I do, I'd genuinely like some suggestions. If there's stuff that I've been witching on about in reviews and you're going, well, why do you assume that I know this?
Which is an easy trap for us.
It is a very easy trap, because I live in a bubble. I work from home. I see other people only with the greatest of reluctance. So I'm as guilty as anyone about this. So no, if I'm talking about something and you're going, Ed, what the bloody hell are you on about? Make yourself, if you want to make yourself known anonymously, you can make yourself known anonymously. There are no stupid questions, but I am aware that the internet judges. So if you are unsure about something, and I think that I suspect that there's bits and bobs that I cover in reviews where you could probably benefit from a drill down. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. As I say, there's a couple of items subjects. That's the word I was groping for. That I want to do over the coming year, but not everything is locked down so tightly that there isn't scope to talk about a few other things. So get your thoughts known about what you'd like covered in this more relaxed setting. Now, the other part about that is there are two subjects that I want to talk about in the coming year, and I'm not going to tell you what they are, where I'm hoping to do so with the benefit of someone who really knows what they're talking about. I want to get an actual industry specialist in. I'll need to make sure that they're content to, try and be as unlitigious as possible and not just spend the time abusing their key rivals. But, I'm sure we can get it to work. So yeah, if you've got a subject matter and you think, well, I don't know if Ed can explain it because he's an idiot, I probably can get my hands on someone who's not an idiot.
Yeah,
so absolutely. That's worth bearing in mind as well. And the pre-recorded nature of these things, it was never that easy to get people to turn up for 8 o'clock on a Monday, 7 o'clock on a Monday evening. We can do these whenever suits.
Yeah, and I think people realize as well that if you are in a particular role where you are a brand spokesperson, live is never
live comes
ideal.
with enormous risks.
Yeah.
I have to say hats off to the various people over the years we did live who put their head above the parapet. But in the hi-fi sense, it's much, much easier to persuade them to come on for a pre-recorded session. But if you've got subjects that you want to talk about, I know I'm not going to promise that I can get the best every time, but I can always most likely ask someone who knows their onions to come along and give me a hand. So that's the other benefit of this. And if you've got subjects that you want to talk about, make your thoughts known. So that's the other aspiration for this.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all like-minded people. We're all part of this community. We're all here to help each other out. So if we can help you out in any way, or if you want us covering subjects like Ed says, or even if you come up with ideas where you think, guys, would it actually be worthwhile doing X, Y, Z? We're open to it. We'll listen to you. We'll see if we can make things like that happen. But that's about it for this week. So Ed, we just need your playlist, vinyl, and albums of the month.
Yes, of the month again. I mean, I said that all the way through the live thing anyway, so I'd almost unlearned it, and it's now time to relearn it again. January is always an incredibly quiet time for new music, for obvious reasons. So I actually had a look back through playback software as to what I'd listened to the most, and the answer surprised me because I didn't realise it was this. But there is a Danish blues trio, and some of you are already rolling your eyes at this one because that's always a series of words that hang together perfectly. They're called Vespo, the Vespo Trio, even, and they released an album in January called Out of Place, and the cover is in some ways it's worth it for the cover alone. And you might argue it's a bit sort of audiophile and a bit twee, but do you know what? They're nice tunes performed by people that know what they're doing. And I've listened to that album in January more than any other new release. So by default, it's the album of the month. And I promise you things will get a bit more exciting as more meaningful music comes out over the course of the year. To cement January being quiet, the vinyl of the month didn't come out in January at all. It actually came out in November, and I didn't notice. Back in 2007, the Young Knives, who are still going-ish, they released an album a couple of years ago, released their second album called Superabundance. It's my favourite Young Knives album. It's got some absolutely brilliant tunes on it. They were lyrically brilliant and very, very musically cohesive, very, very entertaining band. This album never had a vinyl release back in 2007, and even if it did, they'd have pressed like 1,500 copies and they'd be worth umpty £1 million. The good news is, in November last year, it did get a vinyl release. And not only that, it got a vinyl release as Superabundance. So as well as having Superabundance pressed on LP, there's a complete second record of B-sides, bonus tracks, outtakes, and loads of useful and genuinely entertaining stuff to listen to. The unfortunate thing is that the Bandcamp link that I've supplied for this suggests that there are 5 copies left. So get a shift on. There are some other copies out with retailers as well, but I don't know how many more of them there are. But if you enjoyed this album the first time round, it's well worth having. If you've never listened to this album before, listen to this album. It's brilliant. It's it's well worth picking up if that's your sort of oeuvre. Right, playlist, Tidal. They've actually been putting more effort into playlists recently. They had a period where it was just dire. I'm assuming it was AI generated because it was just indifferent and utterly uninteresting. But they've got
to be really, really good.
Yeah, they had they were paying people to do it, and people were doing an excellent job.
Yeah.
This time round, they've got electronic classics. It's on Tidal. It does exactly what it says on the tin, all the way through mid-80s through to about turn of the century. There's some quality tunes on there. Well worth. If the idea of a Danish blues trio depresses you to the point of insomnia, that should wake you up a bit. And your regular reminder, you do not need to be a Tidal subscriber. We can drop the link to the playlist into the comments thread, and you can use a site called Soundiz, sound with double I-Z on the end of it, to port it across to the streaming service that you do use. So you can listen to it on any of the major UK streaming services. And that applies to all the recommendations that we're going to make this year, and indeed have ever made. So,
so I'm going to put Ed on the spot here as well now. So because we're back to doing these monthly, Ed, and it's hi-fi specific.
Yeah.
One thing I think a lot of people learn from through your reviews and what you do is actually find good music that you're actually using within the reviews. So perhaps we should maybe add to this vinyl album and playlist of the month some either classic album or classic demo material that you also suggest on a monthly basis for
Yes,
people to go and test their equipment.
I will get something together for February. If we can agree,
You mean March?
March, yeah, that's the one. I mean, it's 2024, isn't it? I mean, I'm still writing
Yeah.
23 on things.
Yeah.
If we can agree on the best place where the link can wind up, I already do links when I mention other reviews. So it takes you to the product that's mentioned and so on and so forth. And then the magic elves that by which I mean Andy, who turns my reviews into English once I've uploaded them. Things like references to films and TV shows where there's a relevant link to those appear on the site as well. Now, obviously, for music, we don't do music reviews, but it would be possible, in theory anyway, to drop an external an exiting link to a streaming service of many of the materials that we do. It's a bit of extra faff on my part, but not an enormous amount. If you can, we might have to have a poll as to which streaming service they end up going to, and I'm pretty sure it'll be Spotify, but I will check. It's possible to put the links in so you can go and find those things as well, if that is of interest going forward.
Yeah, I
So
think
do you
so.
have like reference tracks, like go-to things
I
that you'll use for
do.
every review as way of comparison?
There's a track by the Cinematic Orchestra called Every Day, and I was trying to idly tally it up. Since 2002, I believe I've heard it over 4,000 times. And it features in an enormous number of things. And it features in so many things that it doesn't actually get mentioned very often, but it's there all the time. I've heard it on more equipment than I can even comprehend off the top of my head. And there are a host of other things as well where that features. Wherever possible, though, it tends to be as much where my mood takes me. How am I feeling? Oh, well, it's time to use this because I'm very familiar with it, but it either is going to cheer me up or cement my state of teenage angst or whatever. So no, I try and keep, I don't just have the 10 magic tracks, but there's a core set of things. And then every Friday I sit down with Cobuzz, because Cobuzz has the best new music system. So every Friday when all new albums come out, Friday morning is spent pottering through new releases, no exceptions. It doesn't matter if I'm reviewing something at the time, it's used to listen to those new releases. And that is one of the perks of my job, and I'm not going to give up on it. So that's where a lot of it comes from.
Excellent. So we will look at
we'll look at doing more of that,
because I think it's, and we'll do the same for TV reviews and so on. If you ever wonder what is it that you actually use to test it, because to answer your question, Ian, yes, I sit and watch the same things over and over and over. But the advantage there is that some of the things that I watch over and over and over, I've actually sat with the creator. So I've sat with the colorist in the grading suite and been shown the scene and told why it looks a certain way.
Yeah.
And then being able to watch that back on equipment, knowing how it should look and how it should look a certain way. And Ed will be the same. Ed, you'll have your tracks that you.
As I say, there's stuff that crops up, but if you like, because those are such givens, it's more a case of bringing something different in a review.
Absolutely.
But no, in terms of dropping a link in, that's not manifestly materially difficult to do. So we'll go from there.
Hopefully you've enjoyed this hi-fi podcast. It is the first one. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you want us to add. Any comments on what we've discussed going forward this evening? So we've been talking about last year, this year, Ed's predictions. Do you think Ed's right? Or do you think he's going to end up with egg in his face? Let us know in the comments. You can comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to AV Forums podcast channel. Of course, you can also listen to the audio-only version. I know that's where the vast majority you do, because you're walking the dog or you're walking to work or whatever. And we have been a little bit over time this week, but it is the first one. But generally, these will be between 30 and 45 minutes. Nice, easy, compact. And hopefully you'll come away knowing something that you didn't know when you started. That might not be hi-fi related, but you'll come away knowing something you didn't know when you started. So there you go. So our next episode is the TV display and calibration edition. We're busy planning that at the minute, but we should have Jules on there as well as Ian. That's Monday, the 12th of February. We might even have a few other guests. It all depends, because the guys are out at ISC at the moment while we're recording this podcast in Barcelona. Which will be the subject of the following podcast, which will be the Home AV edition on Monday, the 19th of February. So if you're interested in integrated home systems, that kind of thing, it's the big show. It's been happening in Barcelona. What's new? What the trend's going to be for the year ahead and so on. You're kind of getting the pattern here. Beginning of the year, we're going to talk about the trends and so on. So you can apply that to every podcast that's coming up at the beginning of the year. So that's Monday the 19th for the Home AV, and then 2 movies editions on the 26th of Feb. All of these will be available from 7 p.m. On that Monday on the AV Forums podcast channel. That's the AV Forums podcast channel on YouTube. So go and subscribe to that if you want them first. They'll then appear on your podcast provider in the audio only version. But every Monday this year, you will be able to have a podcast from us, and you'll be able to take part in what is one of the largest AV and hi-fi communities on the web. So yeah, get involved, get questions in and your feedback and everything else. So if you have enjoyed this, like I say, subscribe, do all the social media stuff. If you want to buy us a coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/AV Forums. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us this time. I'm Phil Hinton. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.